Unwanted. It wasn't the silence that haunted the shelter, it was the sound that came before it. The faint shuffle of paws, the shallow wheeze of age, the high-pitched whimper from behind chain-link fences that begged for something no one could name, but there was one cage with no sound at all. No pacing, no whimper, no tail wag. Just eyes. Fierce, fixed, and foreign. The plaque on the gate was different than the others. Not a name, not a breed, not even an age. Just a code. K918. Below it, someone had scribbled in red marker, "Aggressive, do not interact, not eligible for public release." And beneath that, scratched into the metal plate as if by a key or nail, "Retired." The old German shepherd. In the cage didn't bark when visitors passed. He didn't retreat either. He simply sat there, ears erect, body motionless, head cocked, just slightly, like he was always listening for something that never came. Kids tugged their parents past his cage faster than the others. Volunteers dropped kibble and water in through a long chute and never lingered. And still, he waited until the man came. It was a Tuesday, slow, cold, and cloudy. The shelter door chimed weakly as the man entered. He didn't look like an adopter. Not clean-shaven or bright-eyed or carrying a leash. He wore a weathered jacket, combat boots, and a face that had known too many winters and too little sleep. He walked past the puppies without glancing, past the friendly mutts wagging their tails behind "Adopt Me" signs, past the barking hound and the one-eyed terrier and the trio of pit mixes licking the plexiglass. He walked until he reached the final row, the silent cage, and stopped. From the desk near the front, a young woman in a maroon hoodie looked up. "Sir, you need to check in before—" He didn't respond. She frowned, rising slowly, slipping behind the counter. "Sir, please." "His name isn't K918, the man said softly. She paused mid-step. "I'm sorry?" The man didn't move. His gaze was locked on the dog behind the bars. "His name is Shadow." The dog didn't growl, didn't bark, didn't twitch, but his breathing changed. His ears, rigid before, lowered by a fraction. His tail didn't wag, but it moved. Once, almost unconsciously, his head tilted just slightly toward the man. The volunteer blinked. "You know him?" "I did," the man said. "A long time ago." Vincent Blake hadn't set foot in a shelter in over a decade. He wasn't the kind of man who cried at commercials or posted photos of rescue dogs online. He wasn't even sure why he'd driven 2 hours that morning to a shelter listed in a half-deleted database, flagged by a friend who owed him more favors than phone calls. All he knew was that when he saw the listing, K9018, German Shepherd, unadoptable, ex-military, his stomach dropped like it had the day they told him Shadow was gone. "We lost the unit," the officer had said. "No, survivors, 1K9, presumed KIA. That was 8 years ago. But now he was here, and so was Shadow, a ghost in a cage, a soldier left behind." "You can't be in the back without staff," the volunteer said gently, stepping closer. "And that one's not up for adoption. He's aggressive. Bites. He's failed every test they've given him. I'm not sure why he was even transferred here. Most military dogs go to government kennels." Vincent knelt slowly, not close enough to provoke, just enough for Shadow to see his face, to see his eyes. "It's me, boy," he whispered. "It's Vincent." No reaction. Not yet. But then Vincent reached into his jacket and pulled something out. A leather tag, worn and sun-faded, stitched with a patch barely legible now. "Shadow Unit 7. He held it up. Shadow's ears perked. His body shifted. One paw forward, weight pressed on it. A slow, cautious step. Vincent didn't breathe. Shadow reached the gate. He sniffed, paused, sniffed again. Then, so faintly Vincent thought he imagined it, a small rumbling sound rose from the dog's throat. Not a growl, but something deeper, sadder, a memory trying to wake up. Vincent stood. "I want to see his file." The volunteer hesitated. "I don't think you can. It's all classified." "Then get me someone who can." The office smelled like disinfectant and laminate. The director was a tall woman in her 50s with a sharp bob and a voice like cold tea. She flipped through a thin manila folder, frowning. "This dog was transferred here from Fort Clayton 6 weeks ago. No request form, no handler match. Just a delivery crate and a USB drive we're not authorized to open." Vincent leaned forward. "I was his handler, Unit 7, Shadow Protocol. Afghanistan 2012 to 2016. The last mission he was on was Blackwall, a breach of containment at the Kandahar line. Everyone was reported dead." The woman raised an eyebrow. "And yet here you are?" "Because I don't believe in ghosts," he said. "I believe in cover-ups." She tapped her pen on the folder. "You have ID?" He pulled out a faded badge and slid it across the desk. She studied it. Then her fingers stopped. Her eyes scanned the ID again. "This clearance level. It's expired. But it's real. That doesn't change policy. It changes everything," Vincent snapped. "That dog isn't broken. He's trained. The growling? It's protocol. You never asked the right command sequence. You labeled him aggressive because he didn't roll over for a biscuit. And what's your theory, Mr. Blake? That we're part of some vast military conspiracy to hide a hero?" Vincent leaned in. "I think you don't know what you've got in that cage." Later that night, the shelter emptied out. Lights dimmed. The heating clicked off in the outer kennels. But Shadow didn't sleep. He sat, watched, listened. He heard the night guard shuffle past twice. He heard the janitor's keys jangle. He heard the fox scream from the field beyond the fence. And he waited for the footsteps to return, the ones that smelled like dust and blood and desert wind, the ones that had left him behind. 2 hours away, Vincent sat in his truck in a parking lot outside an old VFW hall. He dialed a number he hadn't used in 5 years. It rang 6 times before a voice answered. "You're supposed to be dead." Vincent exhaled. "You always say that. You. Showing up now, this about the file? It's about Shadow." Dead silence. Then, "No way. He's alive." Jesus. They shelved him, transferred, recoded. He's caged like a monster? "You sure it's him?" I looked him in the eyes. "It's him." "Then you know what that means." Vincent nodded. "Yeah, it means someone's still cleaning up Blackwall." That night, Shadow didn't eat, didn't sleep. He waited. For the first time in 8 years, something had stirred in his chest. Something like purpose. Something like memory. Something like hope. The eyes of a killer. The next morning, frost glistened on the shelter's chain-link fences, and Shadow lay in the corner of his enclosure, his breathing shallow, slow. The sounds of morning feeding clanked from the far side of the building. Metal, bowls, a hose, the occasional bark, but the old German shepherd remained still, until the scent hit him. Not food, not cleaner, him. Shadow's nose twitched, his eyes opened, and he stood. By the time Vincent stepped back into the corridor, Shadow was already at the gate, silent, steady, like a soldier called to attention. The young staffer from the day before looked uneasy. "I don't know what you did," she muttered. "But he hasn't moved like that in weeks." "I spoke to him," Vincent said. "That's not possible. He doesn't respond to commands." "Not to yours." He knelt again, slowly. Shadow didn't growl. He didn't flinch. "Shadow," Vincent said gently. "Sit." The dog's muscles tensed, conflicted, hesitant. But then his hind legs bent and he dropped into a seated posture, ears perked forward. The staffer gasped. Vincent kept his voice low. "Left paw." Shadow raised it and held. "Down." Shadow. "Lay flat." "Up." He rose. The staffer turned and ran down the hall. Vincent didn't follow her. He kept his eyes on Shadow. "You're still in there," he whispered. "Aren't you, boy?" 30 minutes later, the shelter director returned. This time, she didn't bring a folder. She brought a man in uniform. "Agent Faulkner," the man said, extending a hand. He was in his late 40s, pressed and polished, but his eyes were colder than concrete. Vincent didn't take the hand. "Counterintelligence? Department of Defense, K-9 Asset Division. Convenient title for a man who tracks ghosts." Faulkner ignored the jab. "We received a flag when you entered this facility again. Shadow is a restricted unit. I'm here to make sure that restriction remains intact." Vincent crossed his arms. He recognized me. Obeyed my commands. You think that's a coincidence? Reactivation protocols are unpredictable. He's not hardware. Faulkner's voice stayed calm. That dog is not your property. He is a federal asset with sealed deployment records, multiple aggression, flags, and one hell of a paper trail. He's not a threat. He bit a handler 2 months ago, nearly tore off the man's hand. Vincent didn't flinch. What did the handler say to him? "Excuse me? What command triggered the bite?" Faulkner said nothing. Vincent stepped forward. "You recoded him, didn't you? You buried the original command tree, rewrote it for something else? Blackwall wasn't his last mission, was it?" Faulkner's eyes hardened. "That's classified." "I was his partner," Vincent snapped. "He saved lives. He disobeyed a kill order to protect children, and you filed him under aggressive because it was easier than explaining what really happened. That's not your concern anymore. I made it my concern the moment I saw him in that cage." Faulkner sighed. "You want to play hero, Blake? I get it. But some dogs aren't meant to be pets. Some memories shouldn't come back." Vincent didn't wait for clearance. He left the shelter, drove 3 hours west, and parked in front of an unmarked warehouse surrounded by rusted fencing and broken security lights. The door was still locked with the code he remembered. Inside, dust-blanketed forgotten desks and paper stacks. The air smelled like mildew and coffee grounds, but he found what he needed, a flash drive hidden in the hollowed-out casing of a dog whistle. He plugged it into his laptop in the cab of his truck. Shadow's file opened, but it wasn't just his file. It was footage. Body cam overlays, tactical, drone captures, K-9 heat signature tracking, and then Blackwall, the mission. Shadow moving through rubble, smoke, chaos, gunfire overhead, children screaming inside a crumbling school. A command, neutralize. Shadow paused, looked back at Vincent. Then, younger, thinner, bleeding from the shoulder, another command from another voice. Execute. That's an order. Shadow didn't move. He turned, broke into the burning hallway. Seconds later, explosions, screams, then silence. Vincent stared at the screen. He remembered none of this. That's when he realized his own cam feed was missing. The next day, Vincent returned to the shelter. He didn't go through the front door. He didn't wear a badge. He waited in the alley until dawn, then climbed the side fence and made his way to the rear compound where the isolation units were kept. Shadow's cell was locked, but Vincent wasn't here to break him out. Not yet. He knelt by the cage, pulled out his phone, and began to speak. "They erased you, didn't they?" he said softly. "Recoded your instincts, used your loyalty, and when you refused to kill for them, they called you dangerous." Shadow was alert now, closer. "They put a muzzle on your memory, but I remember. I remember the desert, the heat, the school. You disobeyed me to save those kids." Shadow let out a low sound, almost a whine. Vincent continued. "They told me you died because it was cleaner than the truth. You weren't a weapon. You were a witness." Behind him, the night. Guard's flashlight clicked on. "Hey, who's there?" Vincent stood and turned. He raised his hands. "Former handler, just saying goodbye." The guard didn't lower the light. "Back away, now." Vincent did, but not before he whispered to Shadow, "I'm coming back. We're not done." Later that day, Agent Faulkner stood over Shadow's cage with a handler in tow. Test his response. Faulkner ordered. The man stepped forward. "Stand?" he barked. Shadow didn't move. "Sit. Nothing." "Code black. Sequence Delta 4, Shadow growled. "Sequence Echo 7. The growl deepened. Faulkner nodded. "Enough. He's resisting again. Want me to sedate him?" Faulkner hesitated. "Not yet." The handler looked nervous. "Sir, if he breaks command, then we'll put him down." Vincent sat in a motel room with blackout curtains and a whiteboard covered in red string. He had contacts, old ones, the kind that didn't ask questions when he requested encrypted frequencies. He called one. "I need the raw debrief files, Blackwall, pre-sanitized. You know that could get me locked up. It'll get Shadow killed if you don't." A pause. Then, "Check your inbox in an hour." 1 hour later, a single audio file arrived. It was scratchy, low quality, but unmistakable. "Commanding officer. Execute. Eliminate all hostiles. Vincent. There are kids in there." Commanding officer. "They're collateral. You have an order." Vincent. "Shadow. Heal." Shadow's breath. Heavy. Rapid. Then silence. Vincent. "Shadow. No. Stand down." Commanding officer. "Why isn't he complying?" Vincent. "He's not broken. You are." The file ended. Vincent's hands shook. He finally remembered everything. The fire, the screams, the standoff, Shadow refusing to move. Vincent. Stepping between the dog and the order, and blacking out when the building collapsed. He had saved the children. Shadow had saved him, and they buried it. Back in the shelter, Shadow curled on the cold cement floor, unaware that his time was almost up, but something flickered in his ears, the sound of an engine, footsteps, a familiar heartbeat, and this time he didn't wait in silence. He stood. The case they buried. The early morning haze clung to the streets like old regrets. Vincent drove in silence, both hands gripping the wheel tighter than necessary. His eyes weren't on the road. They were on the windshield's reflection, where his own face stared back like a man who just crawled out of a forgotten grave. Shadow was alive, and worse, Shadow remembered, and now that Vincent did too, he knew he couldn't walk away. Not from the shelter, not from the mission, not from the lie they'd wrapped around the truth and buried for 8 long years. He pulled into the driveway of an old brick house, overgrown with weeds and camouflaged by time. The porch creaked as he stepped onto it. The doorbell hadn't worked in years, so he knocked. 3 short, 2 long. A code. The door opened an inch. A wary face appeared, late 40s, one eye cloudy from an old blast, the other sharp as a razor. "Jesus," the man muttered. "You're supposed to be dead." "Yeah," Vincent said. "So is Shadow." They sat in a dark kitchen lit by a single flickering bulb. The air smelled of stale coffee and soldering fumes. Across the table, Thomas "Stitch" Henley, former field comms tech, now permanently off-grid, leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. "They kept him alive?" Stitch whispered. "After Blackwall." "They didn't just keep him," Vincent said. "They reprogrammed him, stripped everything, buried the memories under command trees. But it's still there. He responded to me." Stitch let out a low whistle. "That's not supposed to happen." Vincent slid a small drive across the table. "Raw Blackwall feed, unedited. It proves everything." Stitch plugged it into a battered laptop. The video flickered to life, grainy, chaotic. Explosions. Screams, flames devouring the side of a school. A hallway collapsing. Children trapped. A voice. "Execute all targets," clearance confirmed. Another voice. Vincent's. "There are kids in there?" The footage zoomed in on Shadow, pausing, growling. Then instead of moving forward, the dog turned, bolted toward the screams. And then, silence. Stitch leaned back, pale. "So that's what they erased. They called him aggressive," Vincent said. bitterness curling around each word. All because he disobeyed a direct kill order. Stitch closed the laptop. This isn't just about Shadow anymore. This is a war crime, buried under classified. And if you're digging it up, I already started. Stitch looked at him. Then you'd better finish it. Fast. Back at the shelter, the mood was shifting. Shadow hadn't growled in days. He didn't snarl at the handlers. He watched. Waited. Every time the door opened, he rose. The staff noticed. He's calmer, one of them whispered to another. He's waiting for someone, said the other. Faulkner noticed too, and he didn't like it. He stood outside the cage with a new agent, a lean man in dark tactical gear. His behavior shifting, Faulkner muttered. He's remembering. The agent raised an eyebrow. That a problem? If he remembers everything, we can't control what he does next. The agent studied Shadow. We could accelerate the process. Meaning, trigger the suppressed layers. See what comes up. Faulkner hesitated. That dog holds encrypted behavior. Paths. If he flips, then we'll see which side of the war he's still on. That night, the test began. Shadow's cage was isolated from the others. A projector cast flickering light on the opposite wall. Images from the Kandahar mission, enhanced with audio frequencies tailored to recall command encoding. Sequence Gamma 7. Initiate Phase 2. A voice said over the intercom. At first, nothing happened. Then Shadow's body stiffened. His ears twitched. His breathing slowed. Khedive. Images changed. Buildings collapsing. Gunfire. Screaming children. Shadow growled. Sequence Beta 9. Shadow rose. Not like a dog waking from sleep, but like a soldier hearing a drill siren. Deploy simulation, Faulkner said into his mic. A dummy figure, life-sized, clothed, and soaked in the synthetic scent of combat stress hormones, was wheeled into view behind a mesh barrier. Shadow didn't attack. He paced, sniffed the air, then sat, and howled. Not a long, mournful call, a short, broken one. Like a signal. Faulkner turned to the tech beside him. Did he just... It's a distress. Code, the tech said softly. From his original programming, Faulkner clenched his jaw. Shut it down. Now. The next morning, Vincent stood outside a courthouse with a duffel bag and a locked box of documents. He handed it to a lawyer in a gray suit. That's everything. Records, debriefs, the audio file. Surveillance footage. You're sure? You want to go public? The lawyer asked. If you file this, there's no going back. I'm not here for revenge, Vincent said. I'm here for the truth, and for Shadow. Inside the shelter, Shadow sat in his cage, ears low. He didn't react when the handlers came in that morning, but when the door opened, he stood. Vincent stepped inside. Faulkner trailed behind him, his face blank. Official release has been denied, Faulkner said. But you've stirred enough of a mess that the higher-ups want it cleaned quietly. You get 30 minutes. Vincent stepped forward. Shadow moved toward him. Slowly, cautiously. Then, with a single low whine, the dog pressed his forehead against Vincent's chest. Vincent dropped to his knees, arms wrapping around the dog's neck. You're still in there, he whispered. I knew it. Behind them, Faulkner shifted uncomfortably. This changes nothing, he muttered. Vincent turned. It changes everything. Back at the motel, Vincent unrolled a blanket in the corner. Shadow lay on it without protest. Vincent dropped onto the bed, exhausted. He stared at the ceiling. What did they make you forget, boy? Shadow looked up, and for the first time, his eyes didn't look broken. They looked alive. The next day, headlines started surfacing. Whistleblower exposes. DoD K-9 protocol cover-up. Veteran handler files lawsuit over suppressed mission footage. Hero dog or weapon? Military K-9's story. Sparks outrage. Vincent's inbox exploded, but he ignored them all. He was sitting in the grass of an open field, tossing a rubber ball. Shadow chased it. Not fast. Not like he used to, but with joy. And when he brought it back, Vincent ruffled his ears. "You earned this," he whispered. "You deserve peace." Shadow licked his palm. But in his eyes, something flickered. Something not at peace. Something unfinished. That night, Vincent's motel room phone rang. No caller ID. He picked up. A voice whispered, "You don't know what you've done." Then the line went dead. Vincent stared at the phone, then at Shadow, who was standing again, alert, ears perked, as if he'd heard the voice too. Voices in the silence. The wind that night carried a strange weight. It blew through the empty fields behind the motel with the hushed breath of things long buried, things not meant to be disturbed. Vincent stood outside, arms crossed, watching. The tree line. He didn't know what he was waiting for, but Shadow did. The old dog was already sitting by the back door, still, watching, the same way he used to back in Kandahar, when the wind meant more than weather. It meant motion, change, threat. Vincent lit a cigarette. "I thought I left the ghosts overseas," he murmured. Shadow didn't move. Only the sound of distant cars rolling over highway concrete broke the silence, until, crunch, a footstep. Vincent flicked the cigarette away. Inside, now. Shadow obeyed instantly, slipping through the door like a shadow slipping through memory. Vincent grabbed the old Glock he kept under the bed and moved to the window. Nothing. No headlights. No movement. But he felt it. The quiet tension that comes just before something bad. He waited an hour, then 2. At 3:18 a.m., a single car passed the motel entrance without slowing down. A black SUV with government plates, tinted windows. Vincent didn't sleep that night. Neither did Shadow. The next morning, Vincent stood across from a long wooden table inside a rented conference room at a local law office. On the wall behind him, a screen displayed images from the Blackwall mission. The footage was real, unedited, explosive, and damning. Across from him sat 4 men and 1 woman, journalists, lawyers, and 1 civilian investigator with a badge tucked just out of sight. "You're telling us," the woman said carefully, "that this dog, Shadow, was ordered to execute civilians and refused." "He wasn't ordered to kill civilians directly," Vincent clarified. "He was given a blanket command to clear the structure, but we both knew what that meant." "And he disobeyed?" Vincent nodded. "He went off path, saved the children, disobeyed command hierarchy. He was punished for loyalty." One of the journalists leaned forward. "Where is he now?" "Safe," Vincent lied. The civilian investigator didn't look up from her notebook. "You realize this isn't just a K-9 case. If what you're saying is true, this opens up an entire series of cover-ups. Government denial. Abuse of military assets." Vincent said nothing. "Do you have proof of reprogramming?" "Not yet." She finally looked up. "Find it, or this whole story turns into a veteran with PTSD projecting onto a broken dog." Back at the motel, Shadow paced. He hadn't done that in weeks. Vincent opened the door. "Easy." Shadow froze, then approached the bed and sat. Head low. Vincent watched him for a moment, then reached for his phone and cued an old command phrase, one he hadn't used in years. "Echo protocol. Visual memory, Q1. The phone's speaker played a soft beeping tone. Shadow flinched. Then slowly, as if waking from anesthesia, he turned and walked to the corner of the room, where a duffel bag lay open. He nosed it aside. Pulled something out. A shredded patch of fabric. Military issue. Burned around the edges. Blood-stained. Vincent's breath caught. "That's not mine," he said softly. Shadow dropped it at his feet. Vincent picked it up. The name stitched into the cloth was Leontry Daniel M. Krause, a name he hadn't heard since. Blackwall, a name from the dead. Vincent returned to the shelter the next day. Not to argue. Not to fight. To ask, "Where did you find him?" He asked the shelter director. She looked uncomfortable. "We were just told to house him. The van was unmarked. No records." "You keep surveillance?" She hesitated. He placed a thumb drive on the desk. "I need that footage. The original. Drop-off. Time code, driver, license plate. Anything." "You don't have authority—" "No," he cut in. "But I have something better. A witness, a survivor, and a very angry journalist who's got 300,000 readers waiting to find out how this facility got entangled in a classified intelligence dump." She stared at him, then reached into her desk and handed him a disc. The footage was grainy, dated. 3 months prior. A white van pulled up just after midnight. No plates. 2 men got out. Faces obscured by caps. They didn't speak. They unloaded a reinforced crate and left it by the rear door. The timestamp showed they stayed for 2 minutes. Then drove off. Vincent slowed the footage, paused it when one of the men leaned down to adjust a latch on the crate. Tattoo, left hand, a black triangle over a line of letters. F4R. Vincent's blood ran cold. He knew that mark. Forward Response Unit. Private. Contracted. Brutal and wiped. Clean from the records in 2019. If they were involved, this went deeper than a misfiled K-9. This was a black transfer. He called Stitch. Need you to trace a private contractor. F4R. You know how dangerous that is? I'm past caring. You still got that encrypted scanner I built for field drones? In a box in my garage. I need it, Stitch groaned. You owe me so much whiskey. That night Vincent tested the scanner near the shelter. No signals. Then the motel. Ping. Faint, but there. He followed the signal. Out the window, down the street, to a trash bin 3 doors down. Inside, a device the size of a quarter. Tracker. They'd been watching Shadow? Probably since the moment he arrived. He crushed it and drove. No GPS, no phone. Just back roads and shadows. By midnight, he pulled into a ranch house in the middle of nowhere. Inside waited the only person who could confirm what he suspected, Daniel Krause's widow. She hadn't seen Vincent since the funeral. She hadn't even wanted to. But she opened the door, and, when he held up the blood-stained patch, she covered her mouth and sat down. That's Daniel's," she whispered. "He wore that on every deployment. They said he died in an explosion." She nodded. "They didn't tell you Shadow was with him?" Her eyes widened. "No, they said nothing survived." "He did." She blinked back tears. "Then he saw what happened." Vincent nodded. "I think that's why they locked him down." She gave him a box, Daniel's effects. Inside, a notebook, a torn photo of the unit, Shadow in the corner, and a flash drive marked only with a triangle. Vincent plugged it into his laptop. It contained a single file. Video. Helmet cam dot Daniels. Final words. "They want us to burn the whole sector, even the civvies. I can't do that. Shadow knows. He won't go near the command zone. Gunshots. Screaming." Then static. Vincent sat in the dark. Shadow lay beside him. The fire in the old stove popped once. Quietly, Vincent placed a hand on the dog's back. "You didn't fail," he said. They did. Shadow didn't move, but his eyes closed, peacefully. The final command. The wind was picking up again. Vincent stood outside the ranch house with the flash drive clutched in his hand. Shadow lay near the porch, head between his paws, eyes open but still. He didn't sleep much anymore. Not since the memories had started coming back. Not since the howling began, because now, when Shadow closed his eyes, he didn't dream. He remembered. The hallway collapsing, the children screaming, the moment he stood between a man with a rifle and an innocent girl whose only crime was being born on the wrong side of a classified line. Vincent crouched beside him. "You remember Krause, don't you?" Shadow didn't move. Vincent took that as a yes. "We both thought it was just another target run." Sweep, secure, extract. Then they issued the command. Execute full clearance. His voice cracked. You stopped. You disobeyed the one order. They never wanted anyone to question. Shadow lifted his head. His ears twitched. You saw what happened after. Kraus tried to stop it too. He looked toward the distant road, and they buried you both in silence. By noon, Vincent was back in town. He carried the flash drive inside a sealed envelope and handed it to the journalist he trusted most, Lana Ruiz. A woman with scars of her own and a voice that didn't shake when she asked questions that could get her killed. This isn't just a dog story, Vincent told her. It's not even just a cover-up. This is about protocol, about conscience, and what they're willing to destroy to protect plausible deniability. Lana opened the file and began to watch. By minute 3, she stopped speaking. By minute 6, she asked for coffee. By minute 10, she asked for protection. This, she said finally, eyes locked on his, is going to cost somebody everything. Vincent nodded. Maybe it's about time. Back at the shelter, Faulkner paced. The command tests had failed. The reprogramming had degraded. And worst of all, someone had traced the drop-off route. The director of Forward Response Unit had called him personally that morning. We buried this. We poured concrete over it. Why is it breathing again? Faulkner had no answer. He only knew one thing. If Shadow spoke, if the memories locked behind command code fragments ever surfaced, people would lose their jobs, their reputations. Maybe even their freedom. At dusk, Vincent took Shadow to an open field by the edge of the town. He used to do this with him all the time back in training, back when the dog was young and the world was divided neatly into missions, codes, and orders that were meant to be followed. Let's see what's still in there, Vincent said. He pulled a worn tennis ball from his pocket and tossed it. Shadow stared at it. Didn't chase. Vincent smiled. Yeah, that's what I thought. He reached into his jacket again. This time he pulled a rubber grenade casing. He clicked the primer, no explosive, just scent, and rolled it across the grass. Shadow's ears twitched. His body rose. He waited. Calculated, then he ran. Silent, swift, like the ghost of a soldier reclaiming his training. He pounced, grabbed the casing, returned. Vincent took it. Retrieve successful, he whispered. Shadow looked up at him, and for the first time in weeks, his tail wagged. Once, then again. Vincent didn't see the drone until the third pass. Just a blip in the sky, too still to be a bird, too quiet to be commercial. He reached into his pocket and pulled out Stitch's scanner. Ping. Unregistered. Military signature. Low frequency. Move, he whispered. They drove for hours, avoided main roads. Vincent turned off his phone, removed the battery, shut down his laptop, taped a map across the dashboard and used pen routes like it was 1998. Shadow remained silent beside him in the passenger seat, his head low, his eyes flicking left and right every time they passed under a bridge. They reached the outskirts of an abandoned training facility by morning. A forgotten place. A place neither side talked about. Vincent had trained there. Shadow had too. Now it was hollowed out, dead, but not empty. Vincent stepped through the rusted gate and into the old armory. Dust settled over crates marked expended. He moved carefully, scanning every shadow. Shadow followed without sound. They reached the back office. The walls were still lined with field maps, documents pinned and yellowing. A corkboard had faded outlines where photos used to hang. He found what he came for, a steel lockbox bolted under a floor panel. It still required his old clearance tag. He slid it through the reader. A green light blinked once. Then the box clicked open. Inside, a drive, a worn leather notebook, a metal coin, and a set of blacked-out mission logs, one of them marked Operation Final Command. He flipped through them. The deeper he read, the colder his stomach became. The final command wasn't just a phrase. It was a program. Shadow hadn't been trained just for combat. He'd been trained for denial, embedded memory locks, command phrases, emergency shutdowns, automatic behavioral alterations in the presence of contradicting evidence. They had turned Shadow into a walking failsafe. If anyone survived Blackwall, Shadow would never be able to tell them, unless someone broke the code. Vincent pulled out his phone and called Stitch. "Decrypt key," he said. "Final command. It's real. I'm staring at it." "You want the override?" Stitch asked. Vincent glanced at Shadow, who sat patiently near the broken window. "Yeah," he said. "I'm going to give him back his mind." It took 2 hours to upload the files into a portable AI interpreter. They plugged in the phrase sequences, ran the behavioral maps, and simulated a controlled memory drop. Vincent didn't wait for permission. He returned to the field. Shadow stood in the middle, wind brushing through his fur. Vincent knelt and whispered the override phrase into the dog's ear. "Protocol recall. Handler override. Safe house 9. Shadow flinched, tensed, let out a high-pitched whine, and collapsed. For 3 terrifying seconds, Vincent thought he'd killed him. But then Shadow twitched, growled softly, and lifted his head. His eyes, not blank, not confused, but aware. He stared at Vincent for a long moment, then slowly walked forward, sat and placed one paw on Vincent's knee. Soldier reporting for duty, and behind those eyes, the whole story. Vincent drove straight to Lana's office. Shadow rode in the back seat, awake, alert. "He remembers," Vincent told her as he walked in. "Everything. And we have the full data, logs, AI translation, the override, Blackwall, final command, the drone tests, all of it." Lana stared at the screen as he uploaded the files. "This is beyond federal," she whispered. "This is global." She didn't speak for a moment. Then quietly, "They're going to come after you." Vincent looked at Shadow. Let them. That night, as the storm rolled in across the plains, Shadow lay curled beside the motel bed. Vincent sat in the corner, watching the news scroll across a muted TV screen. Uncovered evidence links. Former military canine to suppressed mission files. Handler alleges federal reprogramming of living witness. Justice Department issues statement. These allegations will be taken seriously. Outside, tires screeched on wet pavement. Vincent moved toward the window, pulled back the curtain. 3 black SUVs. Shadow stood immediately, growled low. Vincent turned, met his eyes. "No commands this time," he whispered. "Just instinct." The truth they feared. They didn't knock. They never did. Vincent stood still as the front door burst open, splinters flying into the carpet. Shadow launched off the floor before the hinges hit ground. 3 agents in black rushed through. The threshold like shadows made solid. Boots, helmets, suppressed weapons. Precise, fluid, surgical. Vincent dove left as one shouted, "Target, handler, present, K9 live." They moved for Shadow first, always the dog first, but they forgot one thing. This dog remembered. Shadow spun midair, catching the first assailant by the arm. The man screamed, gun clattering as his elbow snapped at the joint. The second swung his rifle, but Vincent tackled him from the side, no thought, just instinct. The motel room cracked with impact. The table shattered. The third raised his weapon and froze. Shadow stared him down, muzzle bleeding, teeth bared, low growl vibrating through the walls like a living warning. "Stand down," Vincent shouted. "Call them off." But the man didn't. Lower his rifle. Vincent raised his hands. "I have the files. If you kill us, they go live. Every copy, every log, every timestamp." The man hesitated. Then something clicked in his earpiece, and slowly, he lowered the weapon. Shadow didn't. Blink. The man backed toward the door, dragged his wounded teammate, then disappeared into the storm. Vincent fell back against the wall, heart hammering. Shadow padded toward him, sat, and licked the blood off Vincent's wrist. They moved again that night. Vincent called Lana from a burner phone. They found us. "Oh my God, are you okay?" "We are, but we can't keep running." "You don't have to. It's out there. The story's viral, 4 million views in 12 hours. 3 news networks want interviews. I got a call from a senator's office asking for access." Vincent almost dropped the phone. "Which one?" "Connolly, Senate Armed Services Committee. That's the one who oversaw the K-9 asset program in 2015. "I know. You've lit a fire." Vincent looked at Shadow. "Then we finish it." The flight to D.C. was quiet. Shadow wore a vest labeled "Retired Military Service Animal. Do not separate." People stared at the scars on his face, the stiffness in his legs, the way he scanned the exits like a creature too used to war. Vincent didn't care. He sat beside him the whole way, didn't sleep, didn't blink, just waited. They met the senator. In a secure conference room 3 stories beneath the Capitol, Lana joined them, along with 2 members of a federal oversight task force, all pale, all nervous. The senator, Connolly, was a man in his 60s with silver hair and a voice like a funeral bell. "Mr. Blake," he said, "you've stirred quite the storm." "I didn't stir it," Vincent said. "I released what was buried in the rubble." Connolly glanced at Shadow. "So this is the one. This is the one who refused to commit a war crime, the one you silenced." Silence. Vincent placed a small recorder on the table, pressed play. Daniel Krause's voice crackled. "Into the room. They want us to burn the whole sector, even the civvies. Shadow's resisting. I can't. I won't." Gunfire. Screams. Then silence. Vincent shut it off. Connolly folded his hands. That was never meant to happen. But it did. And now, the world knows. Vincent leaned forward. "So what happens next?" "We investigate. Subpoenas. Hearings. But it's not that simple. It never is." Connolly studied Shadow again. "What do you want?" Vincent didn't hesitate. "Full declassification of Operation Blackwall. Official exoneration of Shadow. A signed public statement that his disobedience saved lives. And a guarantee that no other K-9 will ever be embedded with override kill." Commands again. "That's a tall order. Then stretch." That night, Vincent stood on the steps of the Capitol. The rain had stopped. Shadow sat beside him, tail flat against the marble, eyes scanning the horizon like a soldier who finally found something to protect. Reporters called his name. Flashes popped like distant gunfire. But Vincent didn't speak. He let Shadow stand. Let the cameras see him, not as a beast, not as a weapon, but as a survivor, a soldier, a hero. The fallout came fast. Connolly convened a private session 2 days later. Footage from Operation Final Command went public. The military denied it, then retracted, then issued a formal apology for oversight. Vincent watched it from a VA hospital lobby. Shadow lay at his feet. The TV showed a split screen. Him on one side, Shadow on the other, and the headline across the bottom, "The Dog Who Remembered." They returned to the ranch. Lana followed them. Out there just once to film the final segment. Not an interview, a tribute. She didn't ask questions. She just filmed the wind through the grass, the way Shadow limped now, how he still stood when a vehicle passed, still scanned the horizon, still waited for something only he could sense. Vincent built him a new shelter beside the house. Not a cage, not a crate. Just a bed, a blanket, a bowl, and peace. One morning, months later, a package arrived, no return address. Inside, a medal, a plaque, and a handwritten note. To K-9 Unit Shadow. For loyalty beyond protocol, for courage beyond command, for honor beyond silence. Vincent held it in shaking hands. He called Shadow. The old dog came, slowly, but proud. Vincent knelt and clipped the medal to his collar. "Permission to stand down," he whispered. Shadow licked his face, and lay beside him in the sun. He didn't chase any more, didn't train, didn't growl, but every now and then, when the wind was right, he'd lift his head and listen, as if remembering the boy in the hallway, the soldier who disobeyed, the moment he chose conscience over command, the moment that made him a target and a hero. Honor restored. The world didn't change overnight. It never does. But something shifted. A ripple. A tremor. The kind of subtle movement that begins underground, unseen, unheard, but powerful enough to crack stone decades later. Shadow's name began appearing in articles. Not as K9 not as aggressive retired K9, but as Shadow, the dog who refused. Students wrote essays about him, military blogs debated him, civilians cried over him, senators quoted him, and somewhere in the midst of it, a movement began. They called it the Loyalty Doctrine, a petition to reform the training and deployment of all military animals. It pushed for limits on behavioral override coding, retirement support, psychological evaluation. The law passed with bipartisan support. Vincent didn't celebrate. He was too busy taking care of the only veteran he knew who still flinched at the sound of thunder. Spring came late that year. Shadow limped slower now. His walks became strolls. His tail wagged with more effort, but the light in his eyes, what Vincent had once feared was lost forever, had returned. It lived there now, quiet, watchful, whole. Vincent built a small stone marker at the edge of the field, not a grave, a monument, in memory of the orders that were refused, in honor of the lives that were saved, and the dog who chose right over easy. He didn't carve Shadow's name into it. He didn't need to. The dog came and lay beside it every morning, as if standing guard over a truth too sacred to forget. One night, Vincent sat on the porch, a blanket over his lap and a quiet bourbon in his hand. The stars blinked above like old stories waiting to be retold. Shadow was asleep beside him, his breathing slow, his body curled into the same shape it had always taken in their camp tents long ago. Vincent spoke without looking at him. "You know what they called you after you left?" A soft grunt. Not quite a response, but listening. "They said you were dangerous, unpredictable. They said you failed." He looked down. "But I saw what you did. I remember it now. The hallway, the girl, Kraus. You didn't fail, boy. You rewrote what loyalty means." Shadow's tail gave a weak thump. Vincent reached down, ran a hand over the scarred fur between his shoulders. "They gave you medals, and I'm proud of that. But none of them can ever match what you gave me." A long silence passed between them. Then, slowly, painfully, Shadow lifted his head. He licked Vincent's hand and laid it back down. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived in the mail. Thick, embossed, the seal of the United States Department of Defense. Inside, a formal invitation. You are cordially invited to the National Honors Ceremony for military K9 service. K9. Shadow has been selected as a distinguished honoree for heroic conduct under fire and moral defiance in the line of duty. His story has changed policy. His courage has changed law. His legacy will change history. Vincent stared at it, then looked at the old dog sleeping on the rug by the door. He'd earned it. The auditorium was packed. Veterans, families, soldiers in uniform, school children holding signs with Shadow's photo on them, stitched with medals, captioned with words like protector and hero. Vincent walked him down the aisle slowly. People stood, not out of politeness, out of reverence. A silence swept the room that no general had ever commanded. Shadow didn't flinch. He walked like he remembered who he was now. Not a ghost, not a weapon, but a symbol. They reached the stage. A 4-star general stepped forward with a medal resting inside a velvet box. He bent down, clipped it onto Shadow's vest, then stood and saluted. To the soldier who taught us that true obedience means knowing when not to follow, he said. The crowd rose. Applause thundered across the room. Vincent didn't cry, but his throat tightened so much it felt like a wound closing. Later that evening, as the sunset painted the sky in amber and ash, Vincent and Shadow stood outside the Lincoln Memorial. Tourists took photos nearby, but none approached. Shadow lay at Vincent's feet, his breathing shallow again. "Permission to rest," Vincent said, smiling weakly. The dog opened one eye, looked up, and exhaled. He passed in the middle of the night. No sound. No whine. Just a long, peaceful breath and stillness. Vincent didn't move for hours, just sat beside him, holding the medal in one hand, his paw in the other. They buried him beneath the tree at the edge of the ranch. No fanfare, no cameras, just the sound of wind and memory. Vincent carved a new marker, not with a name, but with a promise. He remembered. So we will too. Months passed, then years. And sometimes in the quiet before dawn, Vincent would walk the edge of the field and swear he could still hear the soft crunch of 4 silent paws beside him. Not chasing, not guarding, just walking, as if to remind him that loyalty is not obedience, and silence is not surrender, and sometimes the bravest thing a soldier can do is to disobey.